Hey everybody, this is your old pal Uncle Hondo, your Sports Illustrated beat writer covering the Las Vegas Raiders and the host of the Las Vegas Raiders Insider Podcast. Joined today by one of our Las Vegas Raiders beat writers. This is Michael France, who's been with us now for a couple of months, does a terrific job covering the NFL for Sports Illustrated, and is a staff writer for us covering the Las Vegas Raiders. You can read him every day at si.com/NFL/Raiders. You can also, again, catch him once a week on this podcast. He does a terrific job. Michael, good to have you. We're going to dig right in today. The Raiders knew last year the offensive line was not what they wanted. Um, it is not what they want right now. They still feel like next year's draft is when they'll finally solidify that line. And we're going to get into a lot of subjects today, the tight ends. We're going to get into the offensive line and all of that. But I want to talk specifically coming into the season. They knew after watching film, Antonio Pierce, Tom Telesco discussions, we've got to get better at the point of attack. Zamir White is a guy that when he's able to get some momentum, he is a great running back. Nick Saban years ago told me, I asked him what he was looking for most in a running back. And he said, I'm looking for guys that fall forward. You know, everybody's got great blitzers and somebody's going to blow up a block. But if they're hit 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage, do they only lose two? Because they fall forward for the yard. That's Zamir. But they knew if they could get him in space, if they could get him some opportunities, he can be terrific. You saw it last year at Kansas City. They let Jermaine Illuminor go. They, which was a loss there. They let Greg Van Roten go, who played very well, but he was an older guard. They wanted to get younger. Again, I still think they're a year away from getting all the pieces on their offensive line, but this is a good one. Talk about that mindset coming in. We've got to improve our blocking.
It was made very clear in the start from the Raiders, especially in March when you start off everything. The Raiders re-sign Andre James, ninth in the league in terms of all centers rated by Pro Football Focus. And we're talking about one of the gems of the Coach Gruden era, 2019 undrafted free agent out of UCLA. Comes in, I believe he has a 75 and over 75 run blocking grade. He's a guy who's going to open up holes. He's a great pass protector. And Andre James starts off that whole offseason for the Raiders saying, speaking as the Raiders, we want to get better blocking as a team. Then you get Harrison Bryant from Cleveland, who's going to have to compete for any kind of playing time on the field, of course, because the tight end position is just it's deep for the Raiders right now. Bryant can play like a fullback on sweeps. He can swing around. He can get those blocks off the edge. And in the red zone, he's a good blocker as well. You get Cody Whitehair, who 118 starts with the Bears in Chicago. Pro Bowl guard. Going to be a great depth piece for the interior. You can kind of put them all over, especially as the season goes on and the wear and tear kind of hits. You never know with offensive linemen. You can never have too many good offensive linemen. Then in the draft, you get Brock Bowers, who you've talked about it. The experts have talked about it. Destroyer of worlds as a blocker. Pro Football Focus called him pound for pound as strong a tight end as you'll find. And then Jackson Powers Johnson, who can be a day one starter for the Raiders. I mean, you get him in the second round. I think most years he's a first round pick through and through, but obviously this draft was so deep. We talked about the bad drafters too that helped push great players like him back a little bit to day two. Delmar Glaze, Raiders are high on him. Big offensive tackle, maybe a little bit more raw of a prospect, but the potential, the ceiling is there. And then, of course, the Raiders get Andrus Peat from the Saints, another Pro Bowler. Uh, 2 sacks allowed and 476 pass blocks last season.
You know, when I look at their commitment to blocking, I know that's not sexy, but that is so Antonio Pierce. We're going to do the basics well. Last year, you saw some guys. I mean, Greg Van Roten had a very good year. Jermaine Illuminor, at times had a really, really good year. But their belief was, let's go younger and rather grow with younger guys that are cheaper than have some older guys that kind of make some mistakes that you want to look past. That would be more Illuminor than Van Roten. But I like the way that they're building this offensive line. Still, I still agree. I think they're a year away from there. I think there are some more pieces that will be accumulated next year in the draft. I tell everybody right now, if the quarterback position plays out, I totally look for them to go offensive tackle next year, first round. I know someone said, but that's a year away. Yep. It is, but I know the thinking. If quarterback's handled, then I think that ends up being a big spot. Let's talk about the offensive line for a minute. So let's talk about predictions. Let's start at left tackle, where I don't think there's any difficulty picking this. Colton Miller, when healthy, is one of the best in the National Football League. He's an anchor on that offensive line. I don't see any way that he's not the starter. Your thoughts on Colton Miller?
I agree. I think pound for pound, you could arguably say he's the most valuable player on that Raiders offensive line. One of the 10 best tackles in the league. Shoot, I think maybe one of the top 6 or 7. He just does it all well. Run blocking, pushes people out of the way, gets downfield quick. Great pass blocker as well, especially in a division in the AFC West that's getting stronger with the front sevens. That's going to be huge, especially with Jim Harbaugh in the conference.
Yeah, I kind of laugh because I know Jim. I'm very familiar with Jim. I know exactly what he's going to do, and he's just going to line up and come at you. And he's not going to change. He's not going to try to be who he's not. It's going to be your job, and his commitment to the offensive line and defensive line is going to be mammoth. All right, we go to left guard. We know that JPJ got some reps over there, but those are camps. When it's all said and done, the season kicks off. I expect Dylan Parham, who is, in my opinion, the most underrated player on the Raiders. They're not going to move him to right. At least I don't think they will at this point. If they move him, end up having to move him to right, I think some things didn't maybe go as well as they had hoped. So, but he is a star. The most underrated player on the Raiders. I think he may be one of the most underrated players in the AFC. I am all in buyer. I love Dylan Parham. This is a guy that's up for a nice extension. He's been here 2 years. He's a starter all the time, always healthy, always the best ability is availability. He's great in the locker room. He's not a problem. He's super smart, maybe the smartest guy on the team. I'm a big Dylan Parham guy at left guard. Raiders are solid.
I mean, you hit it right on the head there. Best ability is availability. He's healthy. It's so hard to find an offensive lineman these days, especially with the extended season, especially that interior position down there, the nitty-gritty, the trenches. I mean, all that force on your ankles, your knees, shoulders, hips, all of it. There's so much room for injury. And the fact that he can see the field in the last 2 years as much as he has, it's been incredible. Athletic, bendable guard. It's unfortunate that, well, it's fortunate, but for him, he's wedged between Andre James, who we're about to talk about, and Colton Miller. So you're gonna go under the radar with those two guys, and he's just a stud. And as you mentioned, I think Parham's in for some good money coming up, and he's earned every penny of it.
And the thing I love about him is, listen, you're not hiring Sunday school teachers. So if you don't like a guy, whatever, if he's great at his job, Dylan is a great guy and a great football player. Again, he's like Colton. Colton's the exact same way. Great guy, great football player. All right, now the next guy I can tease a little bit. I really like Andre James, but Andre, I question some of your friends and their clothing buying decisions. Sorry, that's just an inside joke with me and Andre. All right, with some of those cashmere sweaters. I'll tell you the story sometime. Anyways, I love you, Andre. Andre James, this is a guy that's played so well, a UDFA. This is a guy a couple years ago, there was a lot of media claiming He may get cut or he may get, and I kept thinking, what are they thinking? He's solid. He's really good. Again, just like Colton, just like Dylan, really good player, but better guy, just a great human being. I love Andre James. Anchors that offensive line at center, great quarterbacking, good vision. He sees things. A lot of people need to know when they see him just on the line of scrimmage, bent over, and he's pointing at things or whatever, it looks like he's moving around. He's actually calling, the center calls the offensive line blocking schemes. He's the quarterback of the offensive line. I am all in. Love Andre James.
I love him too. He might be one of my favorite players on the Raiders. Just a dude, gets down in the trenches as a center. Of course, when I was in Pee Wee football, I played center, a short little chubby kid. So I always have an affinity for centers. I just love that position. Quarterback of the offensive line. You see him calling out the mics. You see him calling out everything. He just puts everyone in place, almost like a center fielder or catcher in baseball. He just gets everyone to know what they need to do for this next pitch, so to speak, in baseball terms. Just got re-signed. Great move by the Raiders. He's going to be your anchor in the interior for years to come. And just a hardworking guy, great athlete, bendable center, top 10 in the league. And great move by the Raiders. Love
Yeah,
Andre James.
yep, I do too. No argument from me. Totally agree with you on that one. All right, then you come to right guard, which, you can look at Whitehair, you can look at a couple of options. To me, there isn't an option. Um, JPJ, I don't know one team that didn't have a first round grade on him. And he slipped for one reason only, because there are a ton of bad drafting teams. There were so many stupid picks in the first round or where they were picked that made zero sense. Um, I was talking to, I don't know, it was last night, may have been last night or the night before, but I was having dinner. Shannon and I were with some friends, NFL friends. And one of the guys said to me, when this draft is over, there are going to probably be more first round busts. He goes, at any time in my career, he goes, there were so many picks that I was just like, what in the world are these people thinking? I know another guy, another executive at another NFL team whose team was thinking about moving up. And he goes, one of our executives goes, why are we moving up? Look at the teams ahead of us. We know they don't know how to draft. They're not going to take our guy. They're not that smart. And nobody did. And he's like, I could not believe our guy was there. And they had a much higher grade than where they picked, much, like multiple spots. And he goes, there were people that were being selected that we didn't have on our board. And he goes, ahead of us. And we're like, thank you. Thank you. JPJ is a guy that, again, the only thing that kept him out of the first round was bad drafting. I know teams in the 20s that said, we are taking him. I know this. I had heard that he was not getting past the Steelers. But just like Talise Fawaga with the Raiders, nobody expected Bowers to be there. Steelers didn't expect who they got to be there. The Raiders stole him. This is a guy, a 10-year guy, plays 10 years. You know he's going to play 10 years. You put him at right guard. You leave him at right guard. Maybe, well, you just leave him there. You let him go. He's a stud. He's going to make some rookie mistakes, but I am big on JPJ at the right guard. Your thoughts?
It's funny you say that about the first round drafts, or at least that executive did, because watching the draft, I myself was thinking, wow, we might see so many gems in the third and fourth round this year. So it correlates just like that. It really does. Jackson Powers Johnson, when I did my pre-draft offensive lineman rankings, he was one of my 10 best offensive linemen. You read his scouting reports, all you see is power and strength. They're almost synonyms, but those were the two words I keep seeing every scouting report. When you watch him on tape, he's just strong. You're not going anywhere and you're not getting past this guy. Just an absolute anchor at Oregon, great athlete too. And this is where I think the Raiders signing Pete and Cody Whitehair is going to be great because obviously JPJ, as we just said, going to be the Raiders starter at right guard. But as I also mentioned, there's going to be injuries throughout the season. There's always that possibility, especially with linemen,
Yep.
especially with interior linemen. Andrus Pete, Cody Whitehair, great to help mentor JPJ, great to help be veteran locker room presence and help that overall offensive line's experience. At the end of the day, yeah, JPJ is going to be an all pro, likely. He could be top, just a great draft pick. Any other year, first round, maybe even top 20 draftee.
Yeah, I think he was top 20 for sure. All right, so that's why I told you Steelers. I don't remember where they picked; they were in the 20s, but they were like, if he slips to us, the feeling was if he slipped to them, he was going there. All right, now we come to right tackle, where I said this earlier in the year and took a ton of criticism. I told people after the season, okay, do I think they would take Talise Fawaga? Yes, because he's a dude. He's a rare generational tackle. But it wasn't because they didn't like Thayer Mumford. This is a guy that has played well for them. He's a seventh round guy coming into his own. I think he's going to start at right tackle. Sure, there's Cassis Pete, there's Delmore Glaze, who I think is going to get reps, but I think I'm interesting to watch how he comes along quickly. But I'm a big Glaze guy. I just don't know that he's ready right now. I think Thayer Mumford kicks off the season as a starting right tackle. Your thoughts?
I agree. He's played well, great athlete at tackle, bendable, good pad levels. I really like Thayer Mumford as the starting right tackle, starting out with the Raiders. And then in the future, that's just the brilliance of this offseason. In the future, you have Delmar Glaze right behind him competing. It'll make Munford better. It'll make Glaze better. And the right side of the offensive line, which was considered an issue going into the draft and just overall the offseason, is now not really an issue anymore. So great offseason for the right side of that offensive line.
Great. All right, now let's turn to tight ends. So let's talk about all of them because I think there's a couple that are not getting a lot of attention. I expect the Raiders to keep 3 on the final 53-man roster. I can see ways that they would keep 4, but I don't think they're going to. So let's go to the offensive line. I mean, the tight ends. First of all, Brock Bowers, a generational talent, best in his class. Had he gained weight, he could have been the number 1 offensive tackle in our draft with Joe Alt and Talise Fawaga, who are generational. If not, he would have been the 3rd guy off the board. But a lot of people think if that had been just what he did, he would have been 1. Could have been a 1 wide receiver. He was the number 1 tight end. Could have been a 1 at running back. There's so many play. Could have been a 1 at fullback. I mean, when you look at that, he could have been a 1 wide receiver talking about like in the slot. I know there were Marvin Harrison and Neighbors, but I was told by one scout he has better hands than both of them. He may not have their speed, but he's not bad speed. So when you look at a guy who could have been a 1 tight end, 1 wide receiver, 1 running back, 1 fullback, when you start looking at all the offensive linemen, first rounder, there are 5 places he could have been a 1. This guy is a generational talent that, and again, a dude, which for all of our new listeners, that's an NFL term for guys that just can't miss. And there's not a ton of them. There are only 3 in this last draft. He's one of them. Brock Bowers, what a Christmas gift.
How can someone be a football person and not absolutely adore the kid? I mean, playmaker down the field, creates separation, and has potential to be an all-pro tight end as just a receiving tight end too, just with the pure separation, the hands, the playmaking ability, just the explosiveness that I haven't really seen in a tight end prospect ever. And then obviously the blocking. We've talked about the blocking. he just wrecks people on that field, especially downfield too. Brock Bowers was a dog, as you mentioned, one of the 3 or 4 in the draft, and he's going to be a plug and play day one impact guy.
I was told by a coach at Alabama that what made him incredibly good was that you couldn't tell if the play involved him or not. A lot of guys, if it's not them, they're only going half speed. And I was told that at the point of attack, no matter where that is on the field, was the deadliest blocker in college football last year. I want you to think about that one. No matter where on the field was the point of attack, he was the deadliest blocker. That tells you about football IQ right there. All right. Next, we go to Michael Mayer. Last year, the Raiders felt like, and I agreed, he was the best tight end. He didn't have the best tight end year, but part of that was injury. But this is a guy, he's not Brock Bowers, but you get a Brock Bowers at tight end every 25 years. But was the best last year. There's so much he can do. He can block, he can catch. He doesn't have to come off the field. Again, a rare tight end talent. Now, again, not a Brock Bowers, but nobody is. That's like saying, Nolan Ryan isn't a good pitcher because he isn't Sandy Koufax. Well, Nolan Ryan's still Nolan Ryan. Michael Mayer is a great player, can run the ball, all of it. Those two are going to make the Raiders deadly. Your thoughts on Michael Mayer?
I like what you said about him not leaving the field. We talked about this a long time ago with draft picks and value. And is this a player you're going to use a lot? Is this player going to be on the field a lot? How often are you going to need this player? Michael Mayer can be one of those guys. He comes in, 2 tight end set, be an impact player. Even just not in a 2 tight end set can still come in and be an impact player. He can kind of do it all, as you mentioned. That's a guy who he's going to be a valuable piece, and he's a very important layer to this offense. And you mentioned a defensive coach you've talked to in the past said, how do you defend the Raiders now? Well, Meyer is a part of that. And him and Bowers are going to be a great tight end duo. Could go down as one of the great tight end duos, barring injury, and everyone performs right. Like they have that potential, and it's going to be really exciting to see what the Raiders can do in the AFC West. We knew it was an offensive arms race. I mean, you got the Chargers, the Broncos rebuilding, and then obviously Kansas City. It's an offensive arms race in the AFC West, especially in the modern NFL. The Raiders got 2 weapons and 2 tight ends in an important position in the modern game for what we use tight ends for. We meaning just football people. Yeah, Michael Mayer is the guy.
Then we're going to talk about Harrison Bryant. This is a guy, I love your thoughts on him, but I love Harrison. I like his toughness. I like a lot of what he does. They bring him over with a rather inexpensive deal, a guy that they fully expected to make this roster, a guy that, they didn't see a Brock Bowers. Now, I think he makes the roster, but with Mayer and Bowers, I think it opens the door for Cole Fotheringham to certainly compete with him. But Harrison Bryant, I think he's really good. I think he's underrated. Let's talk a lot about Harrison Bryant.
I really liked Harrison Bryant. I mean, obviously, Florida Atlantic wins the John Mackey Award as the best tight end in the country. Great athlete, about 6'5", 6'6". He can run, he can block. Uh, with Cleveland, he was used a lot as a blocking tight end and in the red zone. I think the Raiders could use him almost as a fullback. And I believe Eric Allen of the Raider Breakdown agreed. Swing him out wide, he can get people off the edge. He can just get downfield and kind of like a Brock Bowers, smart IQ when it comes to blocking at different points of attack, knows where to be on the gridiron to make a block. That's huge. And he can get open in the end zone. So Harrison Bryant, I think, was a great depth piece. I mean, tight end is now arguably one of the deepest positions on the Raiders, but that's a great problem to have because once again, injuries in the season. You got to think about that, especially with the kind of offense you can kind of see Antonio Pierce and Luke Getsy wanting to run this season using those tight ends. So you can't have too many good tight ends. And what I like about the Raiders and their tight end room is they got tight ends who are all similar in size, 6'5", 6'6". They can all run, they can all block, and they can all make plays catching the ball. So it's we talk about intangibles and measurables and how a team wants a certain position to be and what their guy looks like. The Raiders have a pretty clear definition, and they keep showing it with all these tight ends they're getting because they almost are all identical. So yeah, love Harrison Bryant. I thought that was a really good signing, and I think he makes the team as well.
All right. So now we come to the fourth guy. This is a man that I know there were coaches that thought he should have made the team last year that did not agree with Josh McDaniels' decision. I know there were players that thought he should have made the team. This is Cole Fotheringham. He was terrific last preseason. I think he's the most underrated. Now, of all the players, the Brock Bowers addition hurts him the most because I thought he would make the team. But now with Brock Bowers, I think he's going to be 4. I the Raiders, I could see a way that they keep 4. I think they would like to keep him. I don't know that they can keep him if he's on the practice squad. Maybe, I'm not saying they couldn't, maybe, but Cole Fotheringham is a guy very under the radar. I am a big Cole Fotheringham guy. Love his play. I think if he doesn't make this team, it's going to have nothing to do with talent. It's going to have to do with space. I love Cole. I mean, the Raiders have 4 NFL starting quality tight ends and Cole Fotheringham. Your thoughts on Cole?
I really like what you said about talent versus space. Love Fotheringham too. Athletic, athletic Pac-12 tight end, played at Utah, right? He is a guy who's just he fits that mold of what the Raiders want in a tight end. Athletic, blocks, gritty, can be a dog, just a true blue football player. And if he makes the team, that will be telling on what Antonio Pierce thought about him, what Getsy thought about him, and his true potential. It's going to be hard. He's going to have to compete for a spot because, as I mentioned, it is one of our deepest positions, the Raiders' deepest positions. And
Wait,
he
wait, one
makes
of
it.
our deepest. Wait, wait, one of our deepest. I
I
didn't know.
corrected
Did you work for?
myself.
Do you work for the Raiders?
I corrected myself there. I thought I did in time. Yeah, the Raiders' deepest positions. Cole Fotheringham, if he can make the team, it's going to be telling, and he can be a real contributor. I think he'll end up on an NFL roster regardless.
He's one of those guys. Now, the way last season ended with injury, that's why I say they may be able to hide him on the practice squad. But if he's able to show some stuff in preseason on film, I think it's hard to keep. And he's one of those guys I was referring to a couple weeks ago going down through the roster when I said, listen, you may have a situation where, okay, we know we're not going to keep him. We don't think we can hide him on the practice squad. Let's make him available for trade and get something for him. Again, because the way his season ended with injury, if they're now, I know a team one time that had a player at a particular position, and they didn't think they'd be able to hire him on the practice squad if they played him. So they literally acted like he was injured. I remember the player was frustrated. Why aren't I playing? Oh, we're concerned about your hamstring. What do you mean my hamstring's great? Well, we're concerned about some things we see on there. And they didn't play him, stashed him on the practice squad. And then when they had to bring him up in week 3 when there was an injury, the guy ends up being an all pro and played for a long time. But the point was is that some of these guys, you hide them because you don't want people to see. That's why I laugh sometimes, and it's not often, but fans will be like, why am I not seeing this guy? Oh, he sucks. We're not seeing anything from him in preseason when everybody who's third string plays. Well, sometimes because they don't want a lot of film on the guy out there. But Fotheringham's going to be fun to watch. All right. France, tell them real quick, what is your handle on social media?
All right. On Twitter, X, it is Michael France SI. That's Michael France, like the country, SI. Go ahead, follow me. Michigan State beat writer as well. If there's any Spartan fans out there, and putting out great content every day for that as well.
He is the Michigan State football recruiting beat writer. He's not the actual beat writer of the entire beat. He is the beat over all of the Michigan State. He also does a lot of NFL writing for SI on various other NFL topics, but he is one of our staff writers for the Las Vegas Raiders. We sure love and appreciate him. The one and only, the great Michael France. Remember, follow me on IG when you go to @HondoSR, X, formerly known as Twitter, when you go to @Hondo Carpenter, and SI.com/NFL/Raiders.